Chapter 4, On the Road to Joppa. Emmanuel starts the narration by saying that this is year 35 AD. It's a clear morning in that year. And here, in this chapter, he calls us to a very important reflection. Something that would like to brainstorm with you about nowadays. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 17, item 10, we have this very sentence about the worldly person. You must dwell with the people of your time in the manner in which they live. Well, Emmanuel is going to show to us something very special about it. But how about us? Do we still struggle regarding being a person of the world, living in the world, and at the same time being a spiritual person? We're actually mortal spirits. Is it possible to be a person of the modern times and at the same time be someone who is deeply attuned to the truth of spirituality? Well, Emmanuel is presenting to us, finally, one of the main characters of our history, the history of humankind, soul. At that very morning, we have Saul visiting one of his friends from Damascus, Zadok. They're old friends. They meet each other. And there we have the description of Saul, this very question, who was Saul of Tarsus? And Emmanuel describes us. At this time, he was 30 years of age. He was full of virility and handsome in his manliness. His Jewish features stood out particularly in his deep penetrating eyes, characteristic of indomitable and passionate temperaments reaching intensive and resolve. Dressed in a patrician tunic, he preferred to speak Greek, which he had learned in his hometown in the company of his much-loved teachers, educated in the schools of Athens and Alexandria. Here we have the description of the man who used to do sports. He was a normal young man at the time, but with very particular characteristics to his spirituality. He was very faithful and loyal to the law of Moses. He aspired to become the doctor of the law and the high priest of the Sanhedrin. And he wanted to teach about the law of Moses to people in Rome and Athens as well. He was very cheerful. And in his conversation with Zadok, as interesting as it is, they talk about this person in Zadok's family who get healed by the so-called men of the way. And then Zadok mentioning it to Saul awakens this fury in his soul of how come we're going to let ourselves be led by this so-called men of the way who are following this Nazarene, this carpenter, this person who hadn't any type of status at the society of the time. So they have exchanges of ideas regarding how to put a stop onto that. But at the same time, in this very chapter, Emmanuel brings us to the attention that Saul, besides that very strong and, as he says, intense and resolved characteristic of his passionate soul, he is also in love. He is in love with Abigail. The description of their relationship, the description of Abigail and Saul's relationship is something really dear to our hearts. Something that we can revive for family ties nowadays. At a time when men were not really much into romantic relationships. Usually people didn't get married because they fell in love, but they were forced by social pressure. In this case, Saul, he was invited by Gamaliel to visit Zachariah's home, and there he met Abigail, the very sister of Jezreel. And Abigail, we have the description of her. She was about 18. She was intelligent, versed in the law, and above all, sweet and affectionate. She was adopted by the couple, and since she also had suffered from the murder of the father and the slavery of Jezreel. And since then, she started dating him. And the description in this chapter of the relationship is the most precious. Saul's respect and reverence to Abigail shows to us, contrary to many people saying that he was chauvinistic, actually, he was very respectful and reverent to his dear Abigail. He used to counsel on her and to be taught and discuss even his most professional ideas. And in that regard, we'd like to also share with you that often to visit Abigail, he would drive from Jerusalem to Joppa, nowadays named Jaffa. Joppa, which is kind of close to the nowadays Tel Aviv. And this was his very common journey to visit Abigail often, and there exchange vows with her. Something for us that is very precious for nowadays. At a time when relationships between men and women, between partners, are so spoiled by selfish motives, here we have two souls really becoming deeply spiritual and loyal to one another, very faithful. We also get to know that as they exchange vows, they also share some common spirituality. This is for us a point of meditation. We all want a perfect relationship. We all want someone that we'll love dearly and vice versa. But here we have a secret. These two souls, they had one very good and common foundation, their spirituality. Whenever they talked and they were in the presence of one another, they were sharing their spirituality as major their foundation. God's will was their major goal. It was their common direction. Isn't that probably the way and the recipe for us to get to a better relationship? Now, we'd like to propose this as our exercise and reflection. Write down, list the elements that you think that you need in your expression of a sublime relationship with your partner. Write it down and think about it. If in some of them, and if you lay down as a priority your spirituality. Let's think about it, reflect it, meditate on it as we prepare to the continuation on chapter 5.